You're tuned in to RX Radio.
All right, so here's what we're doing. This is as close to an old school dating show as I think we've done on the podcast since our first episode.
Yeah.
Which I think had something to do with Tinder profiles or something that clearly represented the fact that we had no idea how Tinder actually worked. So here, we're going to jump right into it. The premise of this, Jay and I were talking about underrated and overrated exercises. So we thought we would get pen and a pad. Well, I would get a real pen and a pad, and Jay would use whatever fucking Bic shit he rolls with. And we would write down pure trash. Yeah. How many t-shirts did that thing ruin?
You know the number one car that millionaires drive?
G-Wagons?
No, it's Toyotas. The number one make that millionaires drive is Toyotas.
Okay, can I stop you there? Do you know the number one car that ISIS drives? Toyotas. So, like, what are we doing here, you know?
Hey, man, I'm just saying. It doesn't have to be expensive to be functional.
So my question would be, what's the number one car that billionaires drive?
Oh, gee,
that's where, sure. Right. Yeah. Oh, geez. That joke is funnier every time you tell it. Okay, so we wrote down a list. Now, I'm just going to call it off the rip. I'm assuming our list of exercises are going to be pretty similar. So we're going to go.
I took some curveballs in here. I did. So we'll see how this goes.
I'm so curious of our curve. I love, so it's written down. You'll see, you can't see, but I'm not going to change it. The camera's coming a little bit hot, but I will put my very, very nice pen, my adult billionaire pen down. And so I won't add to it because I am curious if some of your curveballs match my curve. You're disassembling it like it's a Glock. Like, what the fuck was that? Take the spring out?
It's a cap, bro. Come on.
Okay. All right. So we're going to go, we're not necessarily going to go rapid fire. I think we're both going to give our rating. So we'll go back and forth. We'll alternate. There's 8. So we're not going to go super long-winded. Now, do I think we're going to end up with 16 unique ones? Probably not. I'd imagine there'll be a bit of overlap. I am curious the curveballs, though, because we had an interesting thing happen this week. So for those who are new to the podcast, welcome. Jordan Jiunta, sitting across from me digitally in the country. And I'm Jordan Shallow, and we've known each other for a long time, and we think in similar ways, in ways that it matters, and we think in not similar ways, in ways that I think really matter. And Jordan and I are both chiropractors by trade. We're both performance coaches, and we kind of, we work in the high performance space with, elite level athletes and some interesting clientele. And I had something really interesting. I was actually training one of your clients this week, and Jay, being the diligent practitioner that he is, sent me the program. It's actually 2 clients, sent me the program, and me being the not diligent practitioner that I am, didn't open it. And I just kind of went in, and I had a background with a client and knew the client a little bit, and literally looking at the program after he had said, or after I had gone through one of my workouts, it was almost identical to what you had on paper. It is hilarious. I mean, it makes sense. We own an education business together. We think the same way. We've worked through our thoughts over 600 plus episodes of a podcast. But I'm curious about this, because this is the first time we've done a format like this. So I'm going to start with super basic off the rip. And I think we may actually disagree with this.
Okay.
Barbell back squat. Overrated or underrated? I went straight for your heart, dog. I went straight for the heart.
I know you did. Because my personal, this is one of my personal favorite movements. Like, if I could do one movement for the rest of my life, my back and my knees are going to disagree with me, but I'm going to back squat. But I do think in a training sense, it is overrated. And it hurts my heart to say that but I have to say that because I think of every client that I train, and I think of how few I actually have back squat, except for those that are doing barbell strength specific sports like weightlifting or powerlifting. So I think it's something that's largely overused, and I think people do it very poorly. And I think that there is much more benefit to doing other exercises. So I have to go overrated, hands down on the barbell back
I
squat.
100% agree. Back squatting with a barbell for general population is the Olympic lifting for sports performance athletes as in strength and conditioning.
Yeah.
It can be effective at training a system that's useful in transfer, but there's just so much collateral, not the least of which being the time curve that comes with learning it, that definitely overrated. Okay, all right. I'm glad. I'm sorry, by the way. I'm sorry. I used to like a squat back in my day. It hurts my heart a little bit less, mostly because my heart, knees, and back are all damaged from the things I did to squat really heavy. So I'm kind of over it. All right, so that was my first one out the rip. So squat, unanimous. Marshall, put it on the board. Overrated.
Yep. 100% agree. All right, this one, I'm going for your heart here, and every gym bro's heart, I think. But I think in a positive light, but we'll see. Preacher curls.
Oh, overrated. Yeah, first
Oh.
so overrated because I just think one, if you have a well thought out program that is under some sort of time constraint, like you can only lift an hour a day for 4 or 5 days a week, you should be prioritizing almost regardless of unless you're in a preacher curl contest, which exists. You should be prioritizing heavier compound movements that are going to train the elbow and shoulder, maybe not through the exact same vector of elbow and shoulder flexion like the preacher curl, but in a way where you're better off training, if you are going to train your biceps in isolation, doing so in variable positions to help underload the elbow and shoulder in a deliberate attempt to isolate the bicep, where you should be overloading that shoulder with heavier weights for your pushes and your pulls. And I think it's just a good way to incorporate some shoulder function, mobility, range of motion. So I'd much rather lean to like a high cable or a low cable bicep, or even a single arm dumbbell curl. There's just a little bit more integrated shoulder function. The only reason that I would really choose a preacher is if I'm really limited on time and training unilateral movements are not efficient at that stage of the workout, and I need to do a bilateral. Now, bilateral lower cable in a lengthened position is a really feasible outcome. So I can't imagine, shy of not having that available to me, that I would be picking a preacher. So I think preacher curl by and large overrated. Now, again, I think we're taking a professional stance from a prescription standpoint as practitioners, not from a priority within our training. So me, I like them. I don't tend to do them often. If I do, they are unilateral and they're actually dumbbell. But like a machine preacher curl or even like a semi-supinated, I'm just overrated.
Interesting. I thought that was going to go the other way. And I'm actually going to go the other way on this because I know we deviate. Who would have thought on the preacher curl?
Okay.
So I've been spending a lot of time in a lot of different just commercial gyms lately. And I see every gym bro from 16 to maybe 60 just swinging the shit out of dumbbells at a dumbbell rack. So I think that there is an advantage and the context does matter here, because I completely agree with everything that you just said about unilateral, like higher degrees of shoulder function can be peppered in with arm training, and a preacher curl is not necessarily the one that's going to be the first choice with that. But the way that I see most people perform a curl in the gym, I think there is a benefit to getting into a little bit of thoracic flexion. And there is kind of this isometric shoulder extension quality to a preacher curl that I think there is a benefit towards, because a lot of people, and like this is, again, the context matters a lot here, because in the context that you said, I 100% agree with everything that you said. But in a specific context where the people that I'm thinking of that don't really have the understanding to execute on, a standing or seated dumbbell curl, and there's a lot of swinging, there's a lot of momentum being used. It probably looks very similar. Like there's a lot of shoulder angle changing and torso angle changing and less elbow flexion extension in their curls. I think there is a benefit, because that tells me they don't have that understanding of kind of dissociation between arm movement and torso movement. So I think this is a good way to start to build some sort of capacity to probably get into a greater degree of shoulder flexion because of that isometric shoulder extension. And because of the external support, they don't really have the option. People will cheat these and people will use a lot of momentum. But if you're doing these through a more full range of motion, you're doing it controlled, I think there is a lot of benefit to kind of some of that posterior expansion, a little bit of exposure to protraction against an isometric shoulder extension, that I think there is a benefit there. The thing that's going to make a difference is intention, though. You have to have intention towards those things. So I'm gonna say underrated on these.
Okay. All right. I like it. So we got squat, both in unison. We're both in agreement. Overrated. Split decision on the preacher curl. I'm gonna jump at a turn a little bit. I want to kind of hide the obvious ones. Face pull.
Ooh, so we're talking like high elbows, like out here
with a rope. Face pull and by any denomination.
I'm gonna say wildly overrated. I think a lot of people like put these in as like a pressing warm up or like a shoulder function sort of warm up, but I think that the scapular position is inconsistent with the degree of shoulder rotation here. So that amount of retraction with that amount of shoulder external rotation, I don't think it's consistent with the way that you're going to load the glenohumeral joint against scapulothoracic stability. So I don't see the transfer for a lot of movements or in terms of like the way that biomechanics dictate function at the shoulder. I'm going to say wildly overrated on that one.
Yeah, I think I saw someone arguing the arm path of a effective face pull, and there are variations that I don't mind, but by and large, like to argue, it was actually like this guy was cutting up someone's take on it, and I'm like, well, both of you are wrong. Like every time I've had face pulls in a program, and I've swapped it out with just like pronated grip lat pull down, I'm going to get way more out of the rhomboids in full upward rotation. And even if it's not in the overhead, if someone struggles with lat pull downs, can I just make a quick aside about lat pull downs?
Please.
Something that I've noticed recently, and they're actually not on my list, although they probably could have been, is I find that females are sacrificing the quality of the lat pull downs to show their ass on the internet. You should not have your low back arched when you're doing a lat pull down.
Yeah, I would make that argument. Okay, fair play.
Yeah, I just wanted a quick departure because I was in the gym today, and I'm like, the lat pull down. I'm like, oh, that's a decent lat pull down, which is like something that you can easily fuck up. And then I'm like, well, why is your low back arch? And then I saw the tripod. I'm like, oh, because you're a hoe. Got it. Interesting. Okay, bold move. Yeah. But anyways, quick departure. In every single scenario, when I've seen a face pull, and this is something that has grown on me over time. I used to be a pretty big fan of the face pull. I think right up into the point where my upper back got way stronger than the counter force of my torso on the ground. Like, not saying torso on the ground, but like my feet on the ground. Now a seated lat pull or a seated face pull kind of just turns into a pronated grip lat pull down at a certain point, right? There people counteract this instability issue. But I mean, I think do a heavy row in your program or do a lat pull down and a warm up. I think if your goal is true upper back, full in the overhead or as close to as you can, adjusting your torso position is going to get those scaps in way more upward rotation, which is actually going to bring those rhomboids eccentric. So both in agreement, face pull, overrated.
100%. Yeah. All right. Next one. I'm not going to give it any context because I don't want to skew your answer here, but box jump.
Overrated. I think massively overrated because it's not standardizable, right? Because the body weight and the strength to body weight is such a variant, right? We're going to come by so many different, intersections of strength to body weight that what is this exercise for each person? How do we program it? What is it leading into? There's something that you see done in a very, what I would say like a complex, high risk conditioning format in the way it's programmed in like group exercise classes, whether it's, I hate to pick on CrossFit, but CrossFit or Barry's or F45 or anywhere where you see it, it's usually alongside a burpee of some variation. It's just not reproducible. And if human science is inexact science at best and an applied science at best, just not having that reproducible performance benchmark of strength to body weight, it just means so much. I think of this. I don't know. I wasn't on drugs, was I? No, it was a thought I had. I'm like, am I on drugs? This is a really high thought to have. I think about time in relative gravity. I was thinking about that the other day. I was reading a book by Marco Ravelli, and I was thinking about time. And it's if you and I had the same watch, and you were at altitude, and I was at sea level, you would age faster than I would, because gravity is different. Right? It's Einstein's relativity, right? Here's an example. In Interstellar, where they go to that one planet and time is a minute is like a fucking year and a half. And they get back and the black dude's like, yo, where y'all been? I'm 70. The time is different because gravity is different. And I think about this really in a meaningful way from strength training. When you see, the Apollo moon landing and you watch them kind of floating about and you understand the difference in gravity and how they actually age different than we do here when they're in space, I think there's some truth to that in the way that we can control gravity's force on us. I think we're going to age way different because we're compared to some people, man, me and you are fucking, you're, Lance, whatever. And I'm Buzz Aldrin and we're 1-2 on the moon. And then we look at people who are really springing, really they look like jumping on, they look like they're jumping on the moon compared to us. I'm there's something to this idea of your interaction with gravity. I think at a much more profound level than just can you do a box jump or not? Because I move through the world in a way where what life is to me, being someone who's stronger than most people, it's just a very different experience. Doors, jars, there's a bunch of stuff that people kind of trip over, and not metaphorically, not literally, and sometimes literally, because they're just not strong. And I'll just come in with one, and not, it's not a knock on anyone, but I do think there's something to that. Now, if you're not thinking about gravity to that extent, where you're sitting am I high on shrooms right now, or am I just thinking about the effective time and gravity on the human system, probably shouldn't be prescribing box jumps. I think they have this aura of low skill to them, but I think there's an implication of force production, absorption, transfer, even then getting into the vestibular stuff. It just makes it way overrated and just under thought out. So that's my opinion. Long answer, of course, but box jumps, overrated.
And I completely agree with two things. That is an incredibly high thought to have for not being high. That's the first thing I
we have been high together. You know how my brain works.
I know. It's fantastic. Fascinating. Number two, I also agree that these are overrated, overutilized. I don't necessarily think of a box jump as a low skill exercise. I think it takes a lot of coordination to be able to do it well, right? Like a squat, probably most people can do a squat poorly, but it takes a lot of coordination to be able to do it well. And I think the same thing as I think of a box jump in the same way, and a lot of plyometrics at that, because there's this big wave of everyone doing all kinds of plyometrics right now. And even even in the rehab circle, there's a big kind of push towards plyometrics are rehab. And yeah, maybe, but time and place, right? Time, place, context, all of it fucking matters. It's not just blindly prescribing these exercises. And I think, like you said, it's hard to standardize. There needs to be a level of progression, but before that, there needs to be adaptations that have successfully taken place and occurred for it to be an appropriate next step. And I think that's what people forget. They just throw in plyometrics blindly and say, yeah, I'm working on power, I'm working on speed, agility, but they're not doing the work to create those prerequisite adaptations for this to be the appropriate tool. And then there also has to be an appropriate progression model in place for it to remain appropriate. So yeah, overrated.
All right. Deadlift. Next one.
Oh man, you know, so I don't know the general sentiment on
You
deadlifts
started
right
that
now, but
sentence 3 times.
I know it's because I'm just
Okay.
exhausted. I'm just exhausted thinking of the landscape of people's opinions on the internet. And I would say part of me wants to say appropriately rated, but I think I'm going to swing over to the other side and say underrated because not because of it, my change of opinion on the movement, but because of recent opinions and popular opinions on the deadlift, right? I think a deadlift is a great tool. I think it is kind of like we said for some of these other movements. I think it requires a lot of coordination and there has to be a lot of intention and the technique is important. But the sentiment that makes me say that this is underrated is anyone who's ever said that deadlifts are bad for your back, because it's simply not true. And it's a bastardized kind of sentiment around the movement, because if you can do a deadlift and you can do it well and you can progress it and you can do it heavy, you're going to be healthier than someone who cannot. And you'll probably have a stronger, healthier back. And when people say that deadlifts are bad for your back, it's because they're probably doing them wrong, or there's some sort of discrepancy in the way that these are being executed or prescribed that is causing this to be a movement that is painful for someone. So because of everyone else, I say deadlift is underrated.
Yeah, I mean, saying deadlifting is bad for your back is tantamount to saying that eating protein is bad for your kidneys. And I think that analogy holds true, because if you do have, like, man, unfortunately, some people in my life who have gone through, kidney damage to varying degrees to the level of full transplant. And it's like, yeah, their protein intake is air. Like, whatever air protein content you're getting, that's your protein content, right? But that's because there's pre-existing damage to the kidneys, not done by protein content, done by, whether it's congenital, whether it's, acquired, if you will. So it's much like that. It's like, yeah, if you have a burst fracture, a compression fracture, an end plate fracture, some sort of facet issue or disc issue, then sure, is a deadlift bad for your back? Well, yeah, the same way protein could be bad for your kidneys if there's pre-existing damage that's not caused by that thing. So I think, yeah, it's too much through the paper towel hole. And very much to your point, like, the public sentiment or the discourse around the deadlift right now, and it's been on a bit of a downward spiral, honestly, since was it Robert Obears or whatever, the world's strongest man guy, was like kind of given his 2 cents on Rogan years ago. And I feel like everyone's just sort of been piling on that as like the most, in the same way where a paper comes out that has some sort of finding that's, edgy or new, then that paper gets cited a lot. And then you see it in the list of, I was like, oh, it's been cited like 117 times. I think the source of this original conversation in the public discourse, because usually deadlifting was like kind of a niche thing that you probably didn't take on. Like, most of the general population wouldn't take on deadlifting or undertake deadlifting years ago. 10 years ago, gyms used to look way different. Like, I walk into any gym right now. Like, I train in some bougie ass spot here in Toronto, and there's like full platforms with bumpers. Like, do you know how not a thing that was back like 10, 15 years ago when we started? Like, there was maybe 2 squat racks, and the gym that I trained in was 15,000 square feet.
Jeez.
And there's 2 squat racks. That was it. Like, it just wasn't a thing. Like, this deadlift, I didn't have a deadlift platform. I just pulled off the floor.
Yeah.
So it's like,
you couldn't drop it. You had to set it down really gentle, or else you get like, I don't know,
out, yelled at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think deadlifts there's been somewhat of like a fatwa. Like, deadlifts are the fucking Salman Rushdie of exercises. There's been like a holy war declared against this movement. It's like, leave our boy Sal alone. So deadlift, we're both agreeing, massively, or maybe not massively underrated, but its disparity in underrating is really based off of public sentiment.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right, guys. We'll get back to the episode here in just a second. But before we do, we're going to talk a little bit about Spoken Nutrition. Spoken Nutrition is a project that's real near and dear to my heart. And it looks like a supplement ad in the middle of a podcast, because it is. But I was part of the formulating team that brought Spoken Nutrition to life. So we can guarantee 2 things. 1, a complete product line. You don't need 200 plus products sitting in your shelf. So we really consolidated the problems that high performers run into, and these supplements represent their solutions. Number 2, transparency. A lot of products on the market hide behind proprietary blends. All of our labels are NSF for Sport certified, and they all contain therapeutic doses of all the ingredients inside. So for RX Radio listeners, head on over to spokennutrition.com/RXD for 15% off all your orders. Back to the episode.
All right. We're kind of keeping it in that thread. Barbell bench press.
Oh, I think appropriately rated. I think I'm going to take the middle road here. I do think the barbell bench press has been, I think it's the first artifact of the social media information age putting something in its proper context. I really think that, and I've had a torrid relationship with it, right? Obviously I've torn my pec. I mean, not obviously to you, but obviously not to everyone else listening, but I had a pretty bad pec injury from bench pressing. And, I just think it's in a similar bucket to squats and deadlifts, obviously as one of the 3 power lifts, which leaves it something it's very niche and specific to an outcome or a goal that probably doesn't align with most people. So I in what I see, and I go to commercial gyms fairly often. I think you and I kind of have like a pretty similar vantage point on the general public's interaction with weights. And I think that's something where as a voice on the internet, it's useful to keep that in mind. Like I see people talk about, or hear people talk, or see and hear people talk about exercises, and they have like their own home warehouse gym. It's like, the fuck do you know? Yeah. Right? Like you haven't stepped into a normal gym in like however many years you've been rich from the internet. Like you kind of lose touch, where I'm in conventional gyms every single day. And I enjoy it for this reason. I think bench presses are adequately placed. So they are rated properly, in my opinion.
Okay. That makes me think a little bit, because my gut reaction here is overrated. And this is, my reasoning is almost the same as why I bumped up preacher curls to underrated. But I think I don't have a problem with the bench press, but I have to think, how many times has this been an answer to a problem in my training career as I'm training someone? And it's very, very few, right? It's most people, unless they have bench press specific goals, I'm going to give them dumbbells. I'm going to put them on a dumbbell bench press. I think there's a greater degree of shoulder function with that. I can appreciate the increase in stability for a barbell bench press. And I think that is the appropriate answer in certain cases. But from the amount of, again, gym bros that I see on a bench press every single Monday chest day, I think I have to go overrated here, simply because it doesn't solve as many problems as if you were to just grab dumbbells.
I mean, if getting laid is a problem, I think maybe you're missing one. I'm just saying I don't think that's a problem. I'm just putting it out there. I'm just putting it out there. High school was a long time ago. I don't think you remember the way you used to think. Okay, I like that. I agree with a lot. I agree with all the points you bring to the table. I guess it's a matter of how often do you see it? Because I think I see it. The reason I put it in as adequately rated is I just don't see it very often. I really don't see it being used. But when it is used, you do raise a point. It's like, why are you using it? Do you know, or is it just sort of lore that you're going along with? So yeah, all right, I like that. We'll go split decision on the bench press. I mean, I'm just gonna lob this up because it's easy. Pallof Press.
I don't think I could step back on this podcast if I said anything other than overrated.
Yeah, you know that'd be a wrap. That would be a discussion. That'd be off-camera discussion. Overrated, 100%. I don't even think I need to linger on it. Like I think people may see the face pull and be like, oh, like the stability argument. What is this really doing? Okay, if you can understand why face pulls are bad, you can understand why Pallof presses are just unbelievably overrated.
Yeah. We won't give it any credit by talking about it any more than that.
I like it.
All right, I'm gonna lob one up too. Walking lunge.
I would say most underrated exercise in the gym. I wouldn't I wouldn't say I would. Yeah, it is this is a statement. The walking lunge is the single most underrated exercise in the gym, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
I just think, your access of all three planes, your full underloading of one limb in a true unilateral setting. Shout out to our boy Jerome, did a post the other day. If you're not following the Muscle Mechanics on the Muscle Mechanic, I think is his IG handle. You have to follow him. He's the GOAT.
He's
legend.
the man.
And he brings up a point about we oftentimes denote exercises unilateral that aren't. They're split stance. Right, everything from rear foot elevated to B stance. It's like no. The true unilateral comes into this adoption of center of mass over base support. The force absorption component. What happens when you're trying to apply force with a particular intent of decelerating? I think there's just so many movement qualities that it picks up. And I'll tell you this, and this is what I think its real benefit is. And there's exercises that share this quality. That from a hypertrophy standpoint of the quads or the glutes or maybe a little bit of the adductors, what it does well is it takes the bottleneck of most it takes the bottleneck of most people's stimulus and growth, which is instability of the pelvis, and it drags that and puts a light on it, and it says, right, nothing moves until this moves. So you don't end up with quads and hamstrings and glutes that are bigger or stronger or more able to produce force than the pelvis that they are attached onto. So I think one of the reasons they're so hard is because you're fighting that. You're making the main thing the main thing. And then once you make the main thing, progress in your lunge is the progress in your quad, glute and adductor development. And it's almost like a 1-to-1 ratio. So I think I actually can't remember a time where I wrote a program. I'm sure there has been times where I wrote a program where that movement has not been in it in some way, shape, or fashion, body weight or otherwise.
Yeah, completely agree. The walking lunge is the single most beneficial exercise that I think people can do. If you were to do one exercise for the rest of your life, it better be a walking lunge. I don't think that this could be highly rated enough, so it has to be underrated. Just the amount of benefits, the loadability, scalability, like as long as you continue to get better at a walking lunge, you're going to get better at most things athletically. And even if we're talking about holding 70, 80, 90 pound dumbbells, like there is benefit to core strength and shoulder function here as well. So it couldn't be rated high enough.
Yeah, I agree. I would much rather see someone increase the weight of their weighted lunge, walking lunge, before I see anyone do like a farmer's carry, for example.
Yeah.
Right. I would rather someone do 20-pound walking lunges than 200-pound farmer's carries.
Word.
Now, farmer's carries are an interesting one, and maybe if we have time, we can throw that at the end, because I think there's a conversation to be had about underrated, overrated, and context specific. So I don't want to go too far down. I do want to acknowledge that was the first one that's been on my list as a duplicate. So I'm proud of us for kind of like, mixing it up a little bit. So, okay, machine overhead press.
Oh, this is interesting. Fuck. I don't think I know enough of the sentiment of this, but my gut reaction here, and I'm going to go with it, is underrated.
Boom.
Yeah. And this is funny. Maybe we'll go here next, because I had overhead press on my list, just regular, not machine. So this might be a good transition. But the reason I'm calling this underrated is because most people do not have the proper stability to do an effective overhead press. So I think a machine overhead press gives enough external stability and external support where you can get the benefit of moving overhead and doing so in a stable means. So it will reduce any of the relative risk of the exercise. And relative risk, not saying that exercise is inherently dangerous, but if we're loading tissues that we're not meant to be loading, like I've seen people herniate discs doing overhead presses, right? I haven't seen that on a machine overhead press. So it's kind of reducing the relative risk of this specific exercise because of the added stability, and that kind of uniplanar motion that we have. So I'm going to say this is something that is probably underutilized and underrated in a lot of people's programs.
100% agree. And once you said it was interesting, I could see you having that conflation of like, okay, common decrease access to range of motion. Most people don't have good mechanics for overhead, but the machine aspect, augments that instability, minimizes risk, allows for output. I think so. I watched you follow the trail of breadcrumbs, and I 100% agree. Like the fact that I've never once, and I can't really say this of almost any machine, I've never once had a hard time in any gym at any hour getting on an overhead press machine. And it always blows my mind that that's the case of like such a useful tool to attenuate with almost, with a minimal margin of error, a high output in an unstable position. I fucking love it.
Yeah, that's great. That's getting towards the idea of how valuable a walking lunge is to the lower body. I think some sort of overhead press and like machine overhead press, I'd probably even go a step further and say like a landmine overhead press would be a similar like analog to the upper body for what a walking lunge is. So it's like, I think there's so much value in moving through that overhead range of motion in terms of coordination, stability. And when I say coordination, I mean like from the pelvis, rib cage, scapula, shoulder, all the way to the wrist. Like I think there's so much benefit in that, but I think it is something that it requires. There's kind of a high barrier of entry to understanding that coordination, and this bridges that gap perfectly. So from here, I'll throw it back on you with overhead press. This could be barbell, dumbbell. You call it
free
weight overhead press, not machine.
So I'm going to go with underrated for a lot of the reasons that you laid out. I just, the barrier of entry is one, I don't think it's as high as people give credit. What am I trying to say? I think it's something where if you can't, you should be actively working to be able to. I think that's the utility as like, it's a carrot in the programming, in the motivation of your programming, that because here's the thing, like, and I've seen this happen for the better part of a decade now, especially when I got into online coaching. When that goes, you start putting in yourself in a smaller and smaller box of pain-free function, right? Or pain-free range of motion.
Yeah.
Right. So this is true of like, there's some ancillary exercise that I'm sure we kept off the list of like, overhead tricep extension, but overhead movement, especially concentric overhead movement, it's a completely different game. Right. And so I say concentric, I mean pressing, where eccentric overhead would be pulling, right? Because the weight's pulling your shoulder up rather than you pushing against an implement to move it through space. So I think if you can't, there should be that should really take up a bit of your time in your program to be like, okay, what are the underlying things? And now there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different roads that lead to Rome in this case of like, okay, this would come all the way down to the bicep curl variation that I picked. Maybe I need to get that expansion in my ribs. Maybe I use a preacher. So I work feverishly in the early stages of exercise programming for someone who doesn't have active range into a free weight overhead press position. And, I think it's worth contextualizing what I'm aiming for. I'm probably aiming for, a 7-degree high incline press on a chair as like my benchmark of the overhead. Standing with a barbell, I think is useful, but we start to run into like almost this bench press territory of like, is it the most useful thing? But I think in minimizing these bottlenecks that could inhibit other aspects of your training, it should something that should be absolutely on your radar. If day one you can't program or you're not programming overhead pressing because they can't. I'm taking a look at T-spine rib cage function. I may even take a look at diaphragm orientation. I'm going to look at scapular mechanics, humeral mechanics, and figure out why and how I can most aggressively start to improve it so they can't. Then if I choose to, then I can, but I'm not choosing to because they can't.
Okay. Interesting. Because I have the same exact reasoning as you, but I'm going to go overrated on this one. And
Okay.
the reason I'm going to say overrated is because like just being in a gym, I see so many people go up to a squat rack, load up a barbell, and do overhead presses, and they're lacking that coordination piece. They're lacking that kind of stacked rib cage over pelvis, scapulothoracic stability piece of this that makes it the as valuable as this movement is. So I think the reasoning is the same for me, but I think the people that I'm speaking on, they need to regress to a machine overhead press, because there's kind of this propensity to jump towards a barbell overhead press without necessarily having the prerequisite stability and coordination to be able to execute it on the way where they're getting the benefits from that.
Yeah, I can get down with that. I like that. So, and I think this is going to be. So I have two left, and I think this will be in a similar vein. I'm pretty sure I know your answer. Pull up.
Pull up, wildly underrated. That's
Yeah, for sure.
again, and I know your answer on this already. We've had many conversations about it, but a pull up is probably one of the more difficult movements for people to do because of how unforgiving it is. It's like if learning to squat, there was only a bar with 225 on it, right?
Right.
We
Yeah.
have our body
Yeah.
weight versus gravity to do a pull up, and that's not 100% true, because there are pull-up assisted machines. There are, banded variations, eccentric variations. But I think that the goal to be able to perform a pull-up and perform it well should be a goal for everyone that steps foot in a gym, right? Just the amount of shoulder function, the amount of strength relative to body weight, even like the grip strength portion of it, to be able to hold on to a pull-up bar, like it requires a lot of shoulder stability, scapulothoracic stability, core stability to be able to transmit that force so far distally. I think that there's just so many benefits to being able to do a pull-up and being able to do it well, that this is one that has to be underrated, because I don't see enough people doing them.
Yeah, and I don't think it's early, like to your earlier point about like walking lunges of like you really can't. It'll always be underrated because you can't overrate it enough. Like to me, it's that to the upper body for sure. So okay, we're in agreement as I thought.
All right. Yeah, I'm down to my last two, and these ones are a little bit kind of curveballs, but my next one is a med ball throw.
Oh, interesting. I think the deciding factor here is going to come down to if there is disagreement with you and I. It's going to be based off context.
Yeah.
So this is how I would contextualize it. For I'm going to just, you know what? I'm just going to say overrated. I'm going to say overrated because it's emerged in popularity without understanding its full utility. So by that, it's overrated because intention matters, because intention tells me what you're going to do next, not what you just did. So the outcome of what you do is as based off your intention. Is even if the outcome is good and we're somehow in agreement with you utilizing that tool, if I understand the intention or lack of intention of why you utilize that tool, I'll know whether or not that was a good choice of an exercise, even though the outcome in this current situation is the same regardless. But I know whether or not you know how to apply that effectively in the future. So given the number of times I see people apply it, although maybe in a context that could be useful in given time, without a reasonable explanation as to why, I think it's overrated because the intention dictates that they actually don't know what it's good for. So, it's something, it offers something in a way similar to the lunge where there's a full unloading, right? There's a true, what I think a true concentric phase, because a true concentric phase is, you could potentially look at like a trap bar deadlift as like a similar type of expression, but there's an underloading and deceleration component to it, right? Like if I'm throwing a ball, that one changes the position of my center of mass as I hold it, two adds resistance to muscles as I throw it. there's an immediate change in state of a body the moment the ball is now no longer adding weight or deviating center of mass. There's that I think is a really useful integrated tool. As an expression of power, it's not great at building power, right?
Mhm.
So I think I look at it much more from the neurological side, especially if there's these med ball throws have like a catching component to it, which is probably where I would use them most often, in like some sort of integrated cerebellar type coordination, integrating something post-injury. But as far as like power, and it's funny, that actually leads well into my last one. I don't think it does wonders for developing power. I think it is okay at expressing power. So when I look at it, one, the benefits, transverse plane, oftentimes med ball tosses. Now med ball tosses can be more sagittally based. I would say overrated because the intent is not clear in the context that I see it applied. And we had Derek Hansen on the show years ago, and he said something really interesting that stuck with me. I was actually kind of quoting him this week, and it was something to the effect of like, most power training is too heavy to be fast and too light to be strong. And it's like you kind of get this med ball thing kind of exists in this weird middle ground of like muddled stimulus and no adaptation. So I'm gonna go overrated.
All right. Where do I even go with this? Because I have a lot of so I'm gonna say I utilize med ball throws and catches quite often, and I think they are a very good tool when the intention aligns with the need of the athlete. But because I think it's rare that is how they're implemented, I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to say that they're overrated because it's not going to create a great adaptation. The benefit I see from med ball throws is more so what you were mentioning around accommodating center of mass and having a greater degree of variability in the movement pattern itself than what dumbbells, kettlebells, machines, cables, barbells will typically allow for. So I think it is a good tool to train kind of more fluid multiplanar movements. But it does come back to the way that I see them utilized the most often is not the proper utilization or how I would utilize them. So even though I can see med ball throws as a very valuable tool and I use them often, I do think they're overrated in their kind of common implementation.
Okay. This actually, my last one is the Turkish Get-Up, which I think is another lob across the plate, and your right answer for this. So I'll leave you to say your right answer.
If we didn't do this, I think we were probably pretty close to doing this in the early days of the podcast, is making a t-shirt that said "fuck Turkish Get-Ups." Like I don't think we did that, but it was probably on like a short list of things that we had to do. Just the other things were way more important.
Yeah, the fuck off strong shirt. Anyone that's been around since OGRX days that has a fuck off strong shirt, shout out.
You're
real OGs.
The real OGs.
Okay, so overrated.
Completely overrated. There's the benefits that you can get from a Turkish Get-Up are so muddled by the complexity that it just doesn't make sense. There's no time that I've been with a client and I've been like, oh, the problem that they have can be solved with the Turkish Get-Up, right? It's just too complex, very low stimulus. There's not enough benefit to doing it. There's no real adaptation you're going to get out of it. I really couldn't justify, if I have a session with a client, I couldn't justify that exercise's place within that session when there's so many other things that we could do that were so much more valuable and would capitalize on that time better. So I'd say if anyone's ever using this for any reason, it's completely wrong.
100% agree. Fuck Turkish Get-Ups. Okay, that's my list. Pretty good.
Yeah. All right. My final one. There's a time that I would know where you stood on this, but I don't think I do right now. So my final one for the day is going to be the Zercher squat.
Oh. Overrated. I get where my position has moved, so I see where your curiosity in my position has come from. But I think at the end of the day, a progression of stimulus is the goal, not a progression of load in a single exercise. And I think when you understand how exercises are vehicles for particular stimuli, you understand that a progression of an exercise can exist by changing the exercise, because the true progression of that next exercise is something that gives you more loadable, greater access to the stimulus that we're after. I think in the same way, like, let's say a goblet squat, for example. Is a goblet squat something that is going to, solve your problem at scale? It may solve something in the short term, for sure. In teaching that integrated coordination of an anterior load, prompting a more upright, reflexive spine in a squat. But the progression to a goblet squat, I don't see anyone in the gym goblet squatting 200-pound dumbbells or 130 or 150, whatever, the biggest ever. But I'll see people Zercher squatting 405.
Yep.
I've actually seen more people Zercher squatting 405 than I've seen back squatting 405. And it's like there is an underlying stimulus there that can be achieved by progression through other exercise. And like the first place I have to look is, where is the weight being applied? Oh, through a non-weight bearing joint. Right? Like through this intersection of like your radial head and your ulna, if you're lucky. And it's just like, so you're loading it right on the insertion of the bicep tendon in some like what you hope to be isometric. I just think, it is as rated, or it should be as rated, like a progression to a goblet squat, which should then progress to a front squat, which should then progress to a high bar. Then if you want more posterior chain or hips, then you program in hinging variants or good mornings, or, it's just like, it's the equivalent of like, you go to New York City, you're in Times Square, there's a guy with like a harmonica around his neck, an acoustic guitar, he's farting through another harmonica, and he's got a kick snare on his asshole. And he's just like, I'm like, yeah, cool, man. Like that was a great cover of Wonderwall, but there's a reason you're here at Times Square. And there's a reason that Oasis is still selling out fucking stadiums 30 years after that song was released, because each individual member of Oasis is a better vocalist, a better guitar player, a better bass player, a better drummer. Right. So I look at the ensemble. Thank you. I do what I can. I'm a big analogy guy. I don't know if you guys noticed, but it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, it's impressive, undoubtedly. And I'll give the guy a quarter, scan him a Venmo, whatever. Neat. Times Square. It's kitschy. It's New York. I get it. It's fun. But, tickets for Oasis are probably like $200 or whatever. And they're selling at stadiums. The reason is they sort of divide and conquer. I look at the Zercher squat, and like I know people like Josh Horn can fucking Zercher squat. Like motherfucker's like 500 pounds on the Zercher. He's also probably throwing that on his back and probably fuck shit up too. So in that, I look at that as like, oh, maybe Horn's using that as a deliberate regression, so he doesn't have to squat 14 plates aside or whatever. But in most times, it's honestly, and I'm going to use some San Francisco language, most times it's fucking twinks that should be back squatting that just decide to like take their balls and go home. It's like, yo, can we just like time to move on, bro? Like I see it, and it's like when Kramer goes to karate with a bunch of kids. It's like to me, it's a stepping stone of a skill exercise that the progression of the load is actually not a progression of resistance on muscle, but a deviation of center of mass to help improve awareness and vertical translation of the pelvis, which then puts you down the road to heavier variations of the squat. Overrated.
Ooh, beautiful. Yeah, completely agree. I think the Zercher squat is to the back squat what a Turkish Get-Up is to an overhead press, right? It's an unnecessary variation that the progression is in the wrong direction for the wrong reasons, and it's not going to give the benefits of just progressing a squat pattern would. So yeah, I think it's something that is way overutilized, and it is more of a party trick than it is an actual training modality. Yeah, completely overrated. Absolutely.
Yo, we did.
That was good.
My list is done.
Mine too. Yeah, we did
You
it.
got one? We're done.
We're done.
Yo.
Yeah, we overlap walking lunge. That's why.
Oh, look at us go, man! We're good at podcasting, eh? We're so.
When
good.
we
Listen
remember
us
to
go.
turn on the mics and the cameras, we get it done.
I'm double
We're
checking.
good,
make
right?
sure we did
Mics
those
are
things.
on.
I think we did all of those things. Oh, I also want to shout out. This may have been the first. Actually, no. You're probably going to hear you probably heard an ad in this podcast, and I appreciate you guys still listening because I know that's annoying. But we've been doing this for a long time, and the ad is for the stuff that so we're not selling, we're sharing, because we obviously kind of believe in what we're selling here. So if you made it this far, we appreciate you, and we would appreciate further subscribe, YouTube channel, Spotify, get out there. We're taking over. I think, you know what, we're gonna have this titled Overrated, Underrated Part 1.
Ooh,
if you guys comment, so go to the YouTube channel, comment on exercises in this video, and we won't do it next week, but sometime over the next month or so, we'll do a part 2, overrated, underrated, because I think this is good. I like disagreeing, because we don't do that very often.
Yeah, that was good. I think it was some valuable perspective in both ways, but yeah, we got it done. That's good.
We used to disagree a lot more when we were younger.
That's
Two
true.
reasons. One, you did CrossFit and I did powerlifting. And two, we were just angry.
Yeah.
We were so angry.
I don't know how, but I've gotten less jaded as I've gotten older. Still jaded, but less.
As you've gotten further away from going to chiropractic college, you've gotten
That's
less jaded. Yeah. Every day that goes by where it's one day further from being in chiropractic college, the clouds seem to part. You're like, you know what? Life's not that bad.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.